Good afternoon, let's start. I'm already 10 minutes late. I heard we have 1 hour instead of 50 minutes, so I've used my 10 minutes that Herman also had this morning. The slides will be like this because if I start a slideshow, it really starts sliding. So we'll take it one by one. Mostly this will be a demonstration than a information session because it's easier to show what it's actually doing than just to only talk about it. The name of the presentation is Overrides for Classes, No More Hacking. The developer, Pieter Jan, who built the extension, disagrees with me. He says it's still a kind of hacking. Yeah, a little bit. I do not think it's hacking, and I'll show you why. The extension we're going to talk about is called the OBX Class Extender. And what the class extender does is basically, as the name implies, it extends classes. So in Joomla we have overrides, like they're talked about in other sessions as well, for your front output, like your template files, your display, the way data is shown. But there's no option currently in Joomla to override the model classes, so the ones that are talking to the database layer. The one way to do it now is to either hack that file, which is not really nice because if you do any kind of update, you have to remember that you hacked that file. The other option is to build something yourself, but that's often a lot of work for maybe a single line change that might even be needed. And sometimes there is no other option because it's a third-party extension that you want to make a little change in. So the third-party developer is not going to make the change in their extension just for your use only. So in that case, the class extender is really the solution to this problem. So the installation of the class extender is, let's see, yeah. So should be a bit bigger, I guess. Control. Administrator. Toch weer anders. You saw that. Admin, 3 times. Then you reach the 12 characters. What I mostly do is just hack the database and put the admin hash password in the database. So the class extender installs like any other extension through install extensions, and you can upload it here or do it directly from the URL on the GitHub website because it's a free extension. So you can just paste the GitHub URL and it will install. Once it's installed, you'll find it under plugins because it's a system plugin, as it has to run before the real main parts of Joomla start running. So it runs basically after Joomla has booted itself to the first part and before any other extension is loaded. The class extender is in configuration for the website itself. It's very simple. It only has 2 options. First, you can specify where you are going to place your override classes because they have to live somewhere. And the other option is if the folder should be created if it doesn't exist. Simple as that. By default, if you install the extension, it's unpublished. So you have to go in and publish it either here or from the listing. And then it's ready for use. And what you'll have is, let's go here for a moment, just fine. So we have done the installation, the configuration, and the class extender folder path. By default, I put it in the templates for Joomla 4 and Cassiopeia class extensions. It also runs on Joomla 3. So if you have an older site where you have to do something like that, it still can be used for that as well. There's a discussion where these files should live. Some say it should be with the plugin itself. Others say I want it there. And it's free to configure, so you can do whatever you like. I put them in the template because all the other overrides live in my template. Although I don't build websites, I just customize them for other people. But it doesn't really matter where the path is as long as it's specified, so it can be defined. And then the most important part is you have to define the classes that you want to extend, so that the class extender knows what you actually want to do. And all those class definitions go to in a JSON file called classextensions.json. That file name is fixed, just the location is wherever you want to put it. This JSON file has a couple of options. First option that you can configure or have to configure is the client. Is it running on the site part of the website or the administrator side? So far, I've only used it on the front end side because the back end, there's usually no override there anyway, but the option is there.
Is there an option for both?
No. Now, yeah, you copy it twice. Yeah. Because the other thing, yesterday PT and I were talking about for the class extender as well, is especially Joomla 4, they're separating the classes more. So you have your web application, or your site application, administrative application, your CLI application, and I think also the API application now exists. So there's room for work here to make it even more usable in areas. So the second thing you have to define is the class name of the original class you're going to override. We'll see how that works later in the example. And the third is the file. Where does this original file live that you want to override? So that way the class extender can find the file and do its magic. And then we come to the optional configuration options. One optional is the dependencies. And dependencies is, I ran into one issue using the class extender where at the top of the class they had a require once statement above it. So because the class extender puts it in the folder where we defined where our classes should live, the require once no longer works. Because that file is in the original location and not where my override is. So with the dependencies, you can say, well, if there's a require once, you should load this file, you should load that file, and the class extender will load this file before it starts loading your class. This way you can make sure that any dependency classes are already loaded. I'll have an example of that later as well. And the last option is the route. And the route means when should this override be applied? Is it maybe only on URL A, but also URL B or everywhere? So you can actually limit when the override is in place. Because I have had cases where it should be working on one URL, but not on the other URL. But both URLs are calling the same class in the end. And how does it look like in the JSON format? Now, it's basically like this. The class name is the article model. This is for the Joomla articles. And the file lists in components, content, source, model, article model. As you can see, we have the source, the src in the past. So this means it's a Joomla 4 component. And no longer Joomla 3. And we want to apply it on the site only. And this is an example for HikaShop. If you want to override, in this case, the product view product, so how a product is displayed in HikaShop, it has a hard dependency on the HikaShop helper file because it has a lot of classes in there that it uses. So we have to load the dependency here, otherwise you'll get a nasty error, which I'll also show you. And here's an example of a JSON with a route where the article model override is only applied when I'm in the article view, which has a block layout. So if you have another type of layout, then this override is not applied. The name is only used for, it's used by the class extender itself because it becomes a subfolder wherein you have your specific overrides. And so we can start making our own classes now that we know how to build the JSON file. After you've done that, you have to copy the original file to the class extender location that you have defined in the plugin. So in this case, the original file is in components content source model that I can show you. This is very small. Yeah, I have to see, you have presentation mode. Oh, but it doesn't show the file names. Okay, I'll do it a little different. Just a moment. There we go. Oh, make it a list maybe.
The icons are bigger. Right?
The icon, yeah, that's funny. Let's see. The wrong feature, yeah. No, then the icons just get bigger, not the text. Just a moment. Whoa! So this is the wrong folder. Ha ha ha. That looks like a Joomla site, and it's readable, I guess. So I said I have my overrides in my template folder, so it's templates. In my case, Cassiopeia. And there you'll see, no, you don't see? Haha. So you see there's a new folder called class extensions because that's the one I defined in the plugin and that's where the overrides live. Three times. So there's the class extension JSON and there's another file I was fooling with the full JSON that's irrelevant, so we can actually ignore that one. And in the components folder is where the overrides are. Because I'll get used to it. So in the components I have an override for com content and for com Hika shop. And it's the source folder because that's the new auto-loading structure in Joomla 4 that all the classes live under source with a few exceptions. Because it's not completely converted yet. So we're in the model folder because that's where the models are for com content. And there is the article model.php because that's how the file is called in Joomla itself. And what is in there? I'll also open the original article model so we can compare them. Components, content. Source model. Article model. So this is the original article model. As you can see, it has a lot more functions in there. But in my override, I have only this. Because I want to have a specific author for the articles that get loaded, because then it always shows the same author. But the rest of the file can be deleted because it's already loaded by the class extender. Ooh, where is my... So yeah, that's readable at least. So the main menu has two links to the same article. Oh, sorry, to an article, and 102 is where there's no class extender active, and you can see the author is written by whatever is specified in Joomla. But the class extender has the override Lord as author that is set here in my override class. It's a very basic example of how the class extender works, but you can do anything here with whatever you want to do with the article. Yeah.
Is the article model extension based the actual class of the articles model?
Yeah, I'll explain how that works now. What happens is what the class extender does. Let me go back to here. Let's see where we are here. We are in the templates. So what a class extender does, now you can do it yourself, but if you don't do it yourself, the class extender will do it for you. It makes a copy of the original class. And I'll show you by going to the where are we? It's a bit of a deep structure at some point. Components, content, source, model. So this is the original model, article model, and the class extender will copy it to the article model, which is the class name, and it appends extensions based to it. It will also change the class name inside that file.
So this is a convention, right? Extension base.
Yes, as you can see, it changed the class name from article model to article model extension base. The reason it does that because your class is going to be called article model, and you cannot have two classes in the same namespace with the same name. So it renames it to article model extension base, and that's why we have to extend our class from the article model extension base. So you still have the use of the original file. That's why we can delete all the other things we do not want to touch, with the exception of private methods. You cannot remove those because they cannot be inherited because they're specific to that class.
So as I get it, it copies the original file to a new file named article model extension base.
Yes.
The original goes there.
Yeah.
And you extend a new class named article model, which was the first class, the original class.
Exactly.
Extending the file. Okay.
The copied file, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because what the extension, what the class extender also does, it will check if you do a Joomla update and there's a change to the original article model supplied by Joomla, the class extender will make a new copy to the extension base file. So you get all the latest changes. Yeah, it doesn't take care of anything you change if it breaks then, but yeah, that we'll have to see. But that all depends on how many changes you make. Yeah, that's how it works.
In this case, you override get item.
Yeah.
So if the original get item got changed, you don't. You have to do it. You have to check it manually yourself now.
I do the parent get item, so I always get the original item in this case. If I completely change what get item does, then if Joomla changes the original one, I don't know if it matters for you because you already changed it to your liking and maybe you don't need the changes that Joomla is bringing. So that really depends on the change you're doing. Like for example, yes.
Yeah. If you changes something in the original core layout override, you made an override, you won't have the changes in your override.
Exactly.
In the Joomla 4, you have the indication that something has been changed.
Yeah, you don't have that here.
No.
You never have it.
No, I know.
I'm not going to do that.
But the same is you don't get it from third-party overrides.
One thing.
Sure.
If you're using this and it doesn't work, please check if you're overriding the right model.
Yeah.
Using something with the category block and it didn't work, and then I have to use the article model or something like that, or vice versa.
Yeah, so you really need to make sure you're using the right class. Correct. So what needs to happen is, like we said before, is what we do is we take a copy of the original file to the class extension folder that you defined, and then the original file extends item model, because if you make a copy, it will look like this, and then you have to change it to extend the article model extension base, because otherwise it's also not going to work. I forgot that a couple times in the past. So yeah, in this case, I changed the author, but yeah, there's a lot of other use cases you can use this for. Let's see what else we have. Let me open the class extension file that I'm using. So this is how it looks like. I have one override here for the article model, and I have another override here for the same article model. The only difference is that they both have a route. And this one is called overlord, and this one is called bereikbaarheid, because I thought it was going to be Dutch. They both only work when the option is content, and this one only works with item ID 117, and this only works with item ID 102. Which, if we look here, this is where the 102 and the 117 refer to. And how that looks like in the, let's go to the file system.
Can you set any parameter, any URL parameter in the route? Can you set any type of URL parameter in the route?
No, we
What do
don't.
you mean?
Whatever.
Nah, you mean a get parameter, right, Sakis? You mean a get parameter?
In the URL, yeah.
No.
The default URL parameter.
Okay, so option.
It's these ones, Sakis. We have these ones. You have the option, the field, the layout, the task, the format, and the item ID. Those are the ones you can filter on. But no, not on user-defined parameters.
Right amount of money we can.
You can add your other parameters, and that's the model.
You maybe can override the class extender.
Next year, presentation of next year. Class extender of class extender.
Let's do it like this. So what you've seen is, if I go back to here, is they both have their own name. This is called the overlord override, and this is the bereikbaarheid override. You can see the same folders here. They correspond to that name, because then the class extender will go into that folder to look for your override. Because there's an article model in bereikbaarheid, and there's an article model in overlord. And I'll open the from bereikbaarheid. And you see it's also a very small article model, extends the extension base again. Now what I've done here is, to be a little bit higher maybe, so I've included the profile model and I set the user ID to the item created by. So that's how Joomla stores whichever user created the article. And then I call the model to get the data for that specific user ID. And then I get the email address of that user. And this is only for 102. That's why the written by is the email address of that user who wrote that article. And the other override, now we've seen it before, is the one that I put in there with the set text of the override lord. And then we
It
do.
was not possible to use the model of the users in the front end.
Joomla 4, you can just boot your component. And what I've done here is I have fixed it to item ID 2. Of course, in the real world, completely useless, but it makes a point, I guess. Because if I remove this 2 here, it loads the original file. Let's see, how you. Because now it says locatie en bereikbaarheid, and then laatste uur is added. That shows you that it's a different article because it's a different article title. I want to go back here. So the third one in my example is an override of the Hika Shop product view, which has a dependency. And if I remove that dependency and I go to the product listing, you get the error class Hika Shop view not found because it depends on another class that is not in the override file that I created. So if we add a dependency, the page will load. So that shows you that the dependency can be used as well where needed. I didn't run into it with Hika Shop, but I ran into it with another extension. What is called the form extension? I forgot the name, but it had a require once at the top, which doesn't work because the file will be in the wrong location. But it got resolved with the dependency, where you can specify, okay, if I'm going to override this, I also need this, this, and this file. Yeah, that was the copying. So when you make your own class, you have to copy the original file to the extension folder, either the base folder, or if you have a named route, it has to go into the subfolder. So it's the overlord folder that we saw. Then you have to rename the file to the original class name. In Joomla 4, it's already more the same because of the namespaces that got introduced, where the file name is the same as the class name, the PSR4 standard. But in Joomla 3, it's not like that. You have the view files, the view.html.php, but the class name can be user's view user. So in that case, your file also has to be called user's view user. And let's see the Hika Shop file. So the Hika Shop file here is called product view product because that is the class name. If you look at the original file,
Why do you have such a weird reference structure? CCC.
it's just shortened because there's so many folders deep.
Oh, and this bash, this bash it for you.
ZSH in my case, yes. Still not the right folder. It's a little deep. Let's see where we are. There we go. So this is the original folder for the product view of Hika Shop, where you have your view HTML PHP and your view feed PHP. And there you see the product view product extension base, while the original file is called view HTML.php. So that's something to think about when you also do overrides for third-party extensions, that the file name is most likely not the same as the class name. But the class in the view HTML PHP is called product view product. So that's something more to be aware of when you make that copy. Now this is what I've shown before. Once you've created your copy, you have to change the extents to extents, then the class name extension base. And here it says use what you need. Remove all functions that you do not want to change, well, except the private functions. Any other use statements for namespace entries. Let's see, this is the original one. It has here a whole list of use statements. You don't need them in your override, because in your override you only have, in this case, no function that uses another namespace, so that can all be cleaned up. The only thing I would leave in there is the defined, so the file cannot be accessed directly. Now, add your changes. And then, step 5, sky's the limit. You can do a lot of things with it, I think, but almost every class. Plugins are not supported. Because with plugins, it really depends on the moment that the plugin is loaded, and many plugins are loaded even before the class extender is loaded, because it's a plugin itself as well. I've tried a couple ways, and no, it didn't. I end up with nothing. It didn't work. Just because plugins are loaded so early on in the process of Joomla, that makes it almost impossible to override plugins. A couple example sites where I've used this. One is, I remember the name again, Easy Discuss. Forum post used quite a few sites. And this is a website for a museum, but they have their collection in another site system. But on the other side, they have a button, talk about this art piece, which links directly back to Easy Discuss, where I created a little plugin that will create automatically the discussion in Easy Discuss. But if people don't write anything, you end up with an empty discussion. But if you then go to the list of recent discussions, you have all these items where people clicked and nobody wrote, so it's all empty. What they said, well, we only want to show articles that actually has somebody saying something about it. So what needed to be done is that the query from Easy Discuss had to check if the body was empty or not. Simple enough query, it's a one line where body is empty, or not empty in this case. The only way I could do it was with the class extender, because Joomla has no option to override model classes, Easy Discuss has no option to do it. So the other solution is, like we said before, Joomla has template overrides, that in the view where it's rendered, I copy the class and make all the changes that I need. But it's a query that's about this long, with as many parameters in it as well, and so many dependencies and pulling from all kinds of settings. For those who know Easy Discuss, it has a ton of settings. So I'm not going to figure out every setting, how to use it, and what it should be at that point in the view file. So the class extender was a real lifesaver in this case, because I could just copy the class, leave only the function with the query and add that one line in there. And it's backwards of it's forward compatible, because whenever it's an update of Easy Discuss, so far it's not broken anything, and they're still happy that only the articles with discussions in them are shown in the most recent list. The other site I've used the class extender is, you're not gonna believe this, com web links. They use com web links, and on one menu item they wanted to sort ascending, and the other page they wanted descending, depending on the menu item. Now, there's no way you can configure that in com web links. So we made, or I in this case, made an override of the com web links model and simply checked for the item ID. And if it's that, then sort ascending, and if it's the other item ID, sort descending, and otherwise do whatever you want to do. So for little tweaks like that, there's no alternative to this, if you ask me. Elisa is not here. I thought she was here. Now, Elisa in the other room. She's only looking through the window. Now, Elisa also had some kind of problem with I think it was a core extension. And she was also asking on Mattermost, how do we solve this? Yeah, the only way was with the class extender, and it really helped her out in that case as well. Yeah, and I've used it on so many sites, I don't even remember all of them anymore. Yeah, it becomes, it's also when you have a hammer, everything is a nail, right? But really, if you want to make changes to models, there is no other solution basically in Joomla, other than maybe writing everything in a template override, which is actually not the correct place it should be. But yeah, I'm very happy with it. So thank you, Peter Jan. Any questions about the class extender? There's two useful links. The class extender can be found on the GitHub site of Peter Jan. It's free. And it's also in the extensions directory in case you forget. Oh yeah. That's a useful link too, right? His website, obix.nl. Oh, I can.
Just Obix. That was Obix. Okay.
Yeah, so it's primarily made for overriding classes or the model classes. But yeah, I can imagine that there's other classes that have no other option of overriding. It can be used as well, because it basically just loads the class before anything else loads it. And the PHP internal autoloader sees that the class already exists, so it can use it. Unless some other extension is hard loading it by itself, then you'll get an error because PHP is going to say, hey, the class is already loaded. But other than that, it can be used for basically almost any class.
There are a number of classes that are already loaded before the plugins get triggered. So
Yeah.
if the classes are loaded.
But for 99% of the cases, it can be used, if I would say.
Practical use case.
Yeah. Because that's mostly SQL queries we want to change a little bit in the query that's being executed. Yeah, super useful. And if you have any other questions later, I'm still here all day. Or online as well. Every day. So if there's no questions, thank you for being here. And enjoy.